As we were discussing part two of the Tucker Carlson interview of Devin Archer last hour, I, I did want to mention, I forgot to mention, did want to mention it. There were a couple of things I was disappointed he didn't get to, like what Devin Archer had to say about his fellow partner in Rosemont Seneca Partners, the private equity firm, Chris Hines, stepson of John Kerry. Now, I know the report is that Hines warned Archer about doing business with Burisma, concerned about appearances and so on and forth, both Archer and Hunter. And the story was Archer told Hines, we're going to do this individually. We're not going to do it as part of the firm. But I would like more color on that from Devin Archer, and then maybe that would solicit a response from Chris Hines and we'd get more information. So I wish you would have asked. And Gal Luff, too, just somebody else in the orbit there. The whole Ukraine situation, since it was impeachment 1.0 topic, Trump impeachment 1.0 topic.
Right, because he made a phone call asking about Biden's, businesses in Ukraine.
Amos Hochstein, Obama administration energy official, warned Biden in 2015 that Russian-backed media using Hunter's presence on the Burisma board to undermine the U.S. anti-corruption message. George Kent, top diplomat in Kyiv, you remember him, he was the top witness for the prosecution in the Trump impeachment, said, Ukrainians heard one message from us and then saw another set of behavior with a family association with a known corrupt figure whose company was known for not playing by the rules in the oil and gas sector. And don't forget, your climate czar now, John Y. the Long-Faced Kerry, was the Secretary of State at the time. So it'd just be interesting to get more information from Kerry, from Chris Hines, bring back all the stars from Trump impeachment 1.0 to provide updated color and context on the situation with Biden Incorporated in Ukraine over the last decade. Wouldn't that be interesting? Well, that's maybe what Jim Comer and the House Oversight Committee will do. For more on this, pleased to be joined for our weekly conversation. Dakota Wood served America for 2 decades in the Marine Corps, senior research fellow for defense programs at the Heritage Foundation. Dakota, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
It is great to be with you every morning, every Monday. It's just wonderful. Thanks.
One other thing about this Ukraine matter is Devin Archer did say to Tucker Carlson that Victoria Nuland, who is this ubiquitous figure in the State Department, she's an Undersecretary of State at present, she was one of the targets of lobbying efforts by Burisma, that Burisma executives would lean on Hunter. This is where you got to make a phone call. We need these assertions that Burisma is engaged in corrupt activities expunged from reporting on Burisma. And he did mention Newland by name as somebody who was the target of these lobbying efforts on behalf of Burisma. So there seems to be a lot of people that know a lot more than they've been compelled to disclose at this point.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, it's almost like dealing with children who know that they've gotten in trouble, and a parent is asking a question, the child dissembles a bit, and then later on you circle back and the child said, well, that's not exactly what you asked me, right? And so these physically labeled adults are acting like children, but very smart ones. So it's always, who do you know in these sets of relationships? And so I don't think it's a surprise at all that the same names keep coming up, because it's the people who have operated in that world. They know each other. They know each other's parents. Because of the family connections, it gets them access into areas that might be on a visitor logbook and usually is not in a visitor logbook. And you can drop somebody's name very plainly, but do it in a way that's not explicitly tied to, hey, I'd like $1 million to prosecute this deal moving forward, right? So they're gaming the legal system. But I think any rational adult looking at this would see what's going on and come to a very compelling conclusion just based on the facts and the evidences that you were talking about and then others have covered in some portions of the mainstream media.
But do you think that this is enough to bring Biden down, or at least, you know,
Well,
derail his reelection campaign? Not even
I've almost given up guessing on that anymore. I mean, Biden has an entire career. The only thing he's ever done as an adult is politics. He's always made up stories and invented things. And when he was in a less dangerous position in terms of damaging the country, it was kind of cute, having Uncle Joe misremember things. And
Uncle Joe
hair.
misremember things when he was 45. Yeah, right.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, right.
And so today, here he's at the height of the power, of his power. Everybody connecting with him has everything to lose if he is bounced from office. So they're going to do everything they can to keep him in. The White House spokesperson, his wife, his son, anybody connected who has things to gain, right? Or not be dragged before a court of inquiry and have all their misdeeds, laid out there in public. So Department of Justice, look at what they aren't doing against the Bidens and what they are doing to prosecute Donald Trump and others associated.
Well, the other thing here too is I noted last week for the first time since Russia invaded that public support for continued funding of the Ukrainian war effort was less than 50%. And I can't help but wonder if, part of that is all of what we're discussing and people seeing this as, well, this is Biden's particular interest because he was the Biden family's petting influence in getting big cash from Ukrainian oligarchs. So that's their business, but it's not my business. And so now I see that maybe there's some ulterior motives at play here. Whether that's true or not, or fair or not to the larger effort, it's certainly that, corruption, spreads like cancer.
Well, I think that is a great characterization. I mean, it's perceptions. Are people at the top who are telling me one thing competent, or are they lying to me? And then how should I then question other things that they're telling me if it's the same group of people? So when government officials behave in a way that damage their credibility and Americans' confidence in government, then we start to not believe or not trust anything that a government official says, right? And so it places a priority or a premium on honorable, ethical conduct, and that's the one thing that we don't see at the White House, the Department of Justice, senior leaders in Congress, police officials, judges, that decide to prosecute some crimes and not others. The removal of cash bail, for example. People who push for defunding police for political advantage in that moment. So I think all of these things, so the Biden family's connection with Ukraine, you remember Biden bragging so blatantly about getting the prosecutor removed,
right,
who was pursuing these corruption allegations. He bragged about that.
Yeah.
And then during the campaign trail argues the exact opposite about Trump family connections to some business deal. So it's this hypocrisy that erodes the public's trust in the government functions and the people who have been assigned to execute those functions, and it damages everything across the board. And our competitors globally see that. If you're in Beijing or Moscow, how are you looking at this, and do you see windows of opportunity to act if you think that America is mired in dysfunction?
We're just discussing Section 702 of the FISA Act with Kevin Brock, former Assistant Director of Intel for the FBI, who's great. We just ran out of time with him, but he raised the issue, because I raised the issue of maybe the FBI should just not be in this business anymore since it can't seem to handle this power responsibly. He said, well, who's going to do it? And maybe you can explain this to us. Who's going to do it? Well, I mean, I don't know, DNI, CIA, NSC. We have all these alphabet soup agencies. I don't know who does what and how this sort of intelligence gathering goes from one place to the other, but do we need this many intel agencies? Maybe we should streamline a bit and also limit the damage when you have rogue individuals in charge of these agencies by limiting the power of some of them.
Yeah, so I think there's always a pro and a con, advantages and disadvantages. If you had a single agency that did everything, if it gets corrupted, all is lost. If you have a whole bunch of agencies where they each have a different piece of the pie, it can seem disorganized. It's difficult for them to cooperate with each other, but it's almost a self-protection measure. No one agency does everything. So if you think of the borders of the country, stuff that's domestic is not handled by a foreign intelligence service, like the CIA. That's for others outside or non-U.S. citizens. If you've got somebody who's dealing with stuff outside the borders, then they're not authorized to pursue American citizens, right, with collection and spying techniques and all those sorts of things. So there are these barriers between, let's say, the FBI and the CIA and other intel collection things, because we don't want those instruments of government turned on America itself, on
I get that. I mean, I get division of labor, and I also get, I know you military guys are into redundancies, and I get that too, to an extent. But I guess my point is, especially now, maybe stripping the FBI of its 702 powers, this spying on foreign nationals that had them looking up the names of January 6th protesters. Maybe that sends a message to the alphabet soup of agencies that says, there actually are consequences if we don't stay within the confines of the law.
Well, and I agree with you on that. I mean, if I had a financial counselor and I trusted that individual just completely, I would give them access to, paying bills for me and moving money around and that kind of stuff. But then when there's a hint of corruption in there, I'm going to shut down all access, even if it means I've lost some of the skills that a financial advisor would give me, right? So you can make the argument that the FBI, having those powers that it does, allows it to find problems that would otherwise go undetected. But if they abuse those powers, I think I'm willing to risk losing the ability to detect problems early if the greater harm, spying on Americans, right, is in jeopardy. So I agree with you on that. And part of those answers, when they originally come up with, how did 9/11 happen? Where you had foreign nationals in the United States working with people who had American protections, and there was this boundary between foreign and domestic. How do you manage that seam without divulging something that would damage the privacy and the constitutional rights and protections of American citizens? But when you abuse that tool, right, then I think we've got to really relook at, as you say, the Department of Justice, the FBI having that tool, and it generates a great debate, obviously.
Before we let you go, what should we know about those two sailors that were arrested for spying for the Chinese communists last week, passing along defense info in exchange for cash? What should we know?
People do stupid things. I mean, the fact that they're Chinese in their background brings an additional light on it. But we've had perfectly normal American citizens with no ethnic background also, spying for other countries, divulging information.
Right.
So I think it is not unusual. It's interesting because it's Chinese working with Chinese. But my military career worked with people all over the world, and Americans with all different kinds of backgrounds. And if you got an idiot, it doesn't matter what their skin color is or their ethnic background or whatever.
No,
so
but
I think they're fairly low level.
Yeah, not even that, like Hansen and Aldrich. And I mean, I get that, but I mean, like in terms of like the sensitivity or the,
nothing really serious. I mean, it was pictures, diagrams of ships, how things operate. I mean, all that's important. I'm not minimizing that. But it wasn't, they didn't have access to high-level intelligence that would prove to be profoundly damaging to the country. But if I'm a foreign country, I'd like to know everything, that you're trying to do. Where are the bathrooms located, right, or the heads on a ship. So they were revealing information that shouldn't have been revealed, but it wasn't damaging to the United States national security, from what I understand.
Yeah,
at the profound levels.
I think the lesson for the Chi-Coms is just stick to the spy balloons. We're not so worried about those. Dakota Wood served America for 2 decades in the Marine Corps, senior research fellow for defense programs at the Heritage Foundation. Dakota, thanks as always.
Take care.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Starting August 22nd, the U.S. dollar may have new competition from a new global supercurrency backed by Russia and China. And if the dollar plummets, your retirement could follow. Hi, Stephen K. Bannon. I recommend a gold IRA from Birch Gold Group. To learn more, get a free info kit on gold by texting the word SHELTER to 989898. I encourage you to act. Before August 22nd, text SHELTER to 989898 to get your free information kit on gold now.
There are more than 50 million people enslaved in the world today. Most of them are women and children.
They lock you in cellars or in rooms with no windows. 95% of girls that are born in the brothels remain trapped in the brothels for the rest of their lives.
SOS International is working to make freedom possible for these women and kids. And with your help, today can be the day another victim comes into freedom.
By the hundreds, we are saving those girls and bringing them to a secure place, a place that is a safe home for them to grow in.
Just $150 makes freedom possible for a trafficking victim. It provides shelter, food, counseling, everything they need to start a new life.